Wow. I always like to greet our YouTube audience who may be listening or watching. Nice to have you tune in. Thank you so much. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to be here on the morning of Christmas Eve for a special merging of our Christmas Eve week and Christmas Eve day observances at the Caron Foundation. And I promised myself I would try to be a little brief, but I'm not good at that. Yeah. The cry of a baby is right on point with what I want to talk about. Suffering is an intrinsic part of the human experience. And a great deal of the insanity and brilliance of the human history involves our responses to suffering. And I mean that in the sense that the wisdom traditions of the world, the Eastern traditions, including the prominent Buddhism and Hinduism in their various flavors, but also ancient Chinese forms and Taoist and Confucian teachings, and then in the Western traditions, the Abrahamic faiths of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and then all around the world, also these indigenous tribal forms. They manifest themselves in and around us as ways to help the human community cope with the realities of what it is to be human, right? And being an enfleshed being as we are is not the easiest thing. And I think it's very easy when you're a young tyke to miss how tough this is. But I think if you just stick around, you'll start figuring out that the car starts creaking and I'm trying to not use the vernacular, but manure hits the ventilator, right? And things become difficult, and in at times exceedingly difficult. And I mentioned last week, I've been paying attention to a shift in theory and practice around behavioral health that looks at our biology in a way that kind of favors the body over the intellect and the reason as primal, which I think is right, that we're fleshed beings that do think. And again, when I was a young person, I think I had that reversed. I think I was a thinker that had a body instead of the other way around. And the particular teacher and the movement is bringing new awareness of how human beings respond to threat and this issue of finding safety. So when I was a boy, we learned fight or flight, right? And fight or flight is the thing. And then I was in a training recently, so I've heard fight, flight, or freeze. I had to think about that for a minute, but I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen animals do that. And then most recently I heard fight, flight, freeze, or feign. And the feign was like, what is that? But feign is certain animals, like the opossum or whatever, will feign death, right? Like in a moment of threat where the fight and flight thing is not an option, like a mouse caught in the jaws of a predatory animal will just appear to be deceased. And sometimes evolutionarily that works, because then the capturing animal drops it and then out of here. So these are organic, inherent, innate ways in which we respond to difficulty. And I think that it's fair to say that the move to get intoxicated falls a little bit on the latter side of that spectrum. It's a little bit more of a freeze-feign response than it is a fight-flight response. But I do think in a huge number of cases, our recourse to substances is a response to suffering. I think. And I think for me it was. And it's an unwise and unskillful practice. I sound like a Buddhist there. I've been listening. I never claim I'm adept in that tradition. I love things I've learned from paying a small amount of attention to Buddhism. And there are more wise and skillful ways to respond to a threat than Johnny Walker. I was pouring out some cold dairy beverages in my sink because I'm going to be away from my apartment for a week, and I realized I had bought eggnog without alcohol in it, but it's called Southern Comfort eggnog. And it made me laugh because I was working on this message, and I'm like, isn't it funny that we have an alcohol that's called Southern Comfort? So, and this will cure what ails you, or and I remember the rush of whiskey down my throat, and a sense of the warmth of it, creating a sense of like ease and comfort and safety, and I longed for it because without it I felt hurt and threatened. I didn't like how I felt. So, in the opening of the 5th chapter of the book called Alcoholics Anonymous, which to some of us is well-nigh sacred literature, and a lot of us could recite the opening words of that chapter, and much of it, I could rarely have we seen a person fail. It's thoroughly thought out. If you haven't heard that, sorry, but it's a thing that I could get heads around here to nod, because people have heard it. This is where the 12 steps were first enumerated in print for a large audience, is in that chapter. And the one of the little phrases in that opening preamble to that chapter is easier, softer way. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. And what this week on Thursday, the winter solstice event, it occurs every year. It comes quietly without a lot of fanfare for most of us because it's an astronomical phenomenon, and so these things happen. The solstices and equinoxes pass us by with their routine numerical inevitability, but we do experience change around them, right? And so the very shortest amount of daylight of this current calendar cycle happened on Thursday. And I don't know if that brings you a sense of relief, but it does bring me a sense of relief because my organism responds to the shrunken day. And as the daylight begins to increase again, thank you, Jesus, and then I can anticipate spring and summer. Just knowing that brings me a certain amount of comfort, even though the amount of change from the solstice day to the next day is about 3 seconds. Because you're right at the bottom of the curve. So the change, and then as we get in towards the equinox, the change is more dramatic. You pick up more minutes a day than seconds a day of daylight. In the northern hemisphere, these the Abrahamic traditions of the West, especially Judeo-Christian, so the Jewish and the Christian traditions have festival observances, as do many of the indigenous tribal forms, that align nicely with the shortening and then turnaround and lengthening of day. So there are festivals that speak about light in the darkness, and new birth, and in winter. I love fall, I really do. I remember when I loved winter. I don't love it anymore. But sadly, climate change is taking it away from us. And in this particular latitude, I remember skating on ponds, and it just doesn't happen anymore here. So anyway, don't get too distracted, Jack. You're trying to be brief. There's a point here, which is that we are at this moment in that astronomical pivot that just begins to emerge. And this place, Magic Mountain, Caron treatment centers, rehab in the more general case, is a place where people go in a time of darkness, in a time of difficulty, in a time of suffering, in a time of struggle. I remember hearing a guy deliver a lecture at, I call it the Evil Empire, the North Hazelip, And it's a joke. But a peer facility that is in Minnesota, very well reputation also. And this guy was the spiritual care director there. And in his message, one of the things he said, he was just talking to patients, not a mixed group of patients, family, and alumni as we have here this morning. But one of the things he said, he invited the patients to think about how many times they had had a good, real laugh in the days that they had been in treatment. And then he said, count that same number of days before you got here. And ask yourself, did you have a good, real laugh? Not a sarcastic, cynical, and bitter laugh. And this is one of the signs of the turn. Even if you're not catching the spirit of recovery, it's pretty hard to be in treatment here and not find this happening. I think some of our most entrenched clients, and this is what a client who is enacting behavior that we may feel as staff tempted to punish or to berate or whatever, they're just showing us how sick they are, right? It's not about us, and it's not really even about the treatment. It's just this an ordinary disgruntlement about what is a profound set of difficulties that are emerging, and this is a difficulty too, right? It shows up, although it's the turn. It is the turn, and there are two roads. That's where I wanted to get. There are two roads in front of us in any given moment, in any given time in life. But especially if you have a wristband and you are sitting in this auditorium or you are watching on the live stream around campus somewhere, you have an opportunity to pick one of two kinds of roads. You can pick the road to light, or you can stay on the spiral to darkness. In Narcotics Anonymous, there is this dim forecast. We suffer from a continuing and progressive illness whose ends are always the same: jails, institutions, and death. You can check off one of them. It's an important observation, and a lot of people don't get it. Your substance use disorder has brought you to the institution phase. There's more. Talk to our relapse clients where this might be the 17th episode of treatment. But it doesn't get better. It will not get better for anything but a breath or a moment. That and then another DUI, another incarceration, another broken relationship, another puke in the Christmas tree, another, there's just all kinds of misery and horror ahead if you want it. And I don't mean if you want it, if you cannot help yourself from choosing that, that is where that road goes. It goes into the dark. There is no spring, there is no summer, there is no vernal equinox, there is only more of the same manure that already brought you here. But there is another road. You can go home by another way. This is one of my favorite little snippets in the Gospels about the Magi who visit the baby Jesus. They go home by another way. You can go home by another way. And I am going to tell you, some people think it's the road of suffering. It is. It's a road that embraces the sufferings of our lives instead of turns away from them. And this is the wisdom that Buddhism and Christianity and good psychology and the best skills of people who are wise minds will tell us. I heard it once simply stated, the only way out is through. Because if you're trying to dodge and run and duck and you think you've got the moves, those moves got you here. The magic of Christmas and its story. Yes, this is a place that wants to honor people who will not buy into that tradition, those traditions. I identified as an atheist in the beginnings of my sobriety, and I really struggled with every step I ended up taking towards any kind of faith. But look at where I ended up. It's funny. It's really weird. And my family thinks really? They're still trying to figure out how this happened to me. And me too on certain days. But that's because it's a gift. It is a gift. You don't have to die. You don't have to be in misery. I had in mind, and I'm going to steal another 2-3 minutes to do this. I have a dear friend. He and I were college buddies. And he epitomized for me another way of living when I was drunk, stoned, and high every single day my parents were paying for me to go to a really interesting and great school. I had great teachers. I don't know how I graduated, but I did. But my friend Paul, I'm going to brag about it for a minute, he got a PhD from MIT in computer science. Just a little bit smart. And he's gone on to have an illustrious career, an amazing career. Fortune 500 companies have hired him to help them with their data management stuff. It's just amazing. But the reason I bring Paul is that a few weeks ago I went to visit him. He's dying. We didn't know if he was going to make it to his birthday, which was the 19th of December. I was on Zoom with him on the 20th. And he's alive today. His 3 boys, I'm pretty sure, are coming home for Christmas. But this will be his last Christmas, I'm quite sure. Paul never took the road that brings people here. He'd have a glass of wine or a beer, but he did not find himself entrapped in the misery of continuous substance use disorder, from which it seemed to me there was no exit. And there are people who don't need treatment. They don't need rescue. They don't need a holy beginning. They don't need a miracle like the one that happens here all the time. And I'm so grateful that happens, but it doesn't mean that their spirit's suffering either. We all are going to face that ultimate passage, right? But one of my prayers is to go from this day to that day when that day comes for me, and to have not picked up a drink or a drug, one day at a time. And it's amazing it's possible. I have 17 years as I drank and used every day for 17 years. I have 34 years, so twice as many days not drinking as I had days drinking and using. It's just an amazing thing. So it's possible. That's kind of the point. You think, oh, miracles don't happen and Christmas is like a blah, blah, blah. I don't know about the dude with the beard and the gifts, but the humble turn from darkness to light that is the central theme of this nativity story that you will be blessed to see enacted by our patients in a fun way is one of transformation and new beginnings. And you can find them here. Merry Christmas, everybody. God bless. Thank you.